Tonight we have a guest speaker, a very special guest speaker coming in, former Governor of Missouri, Bob Holden, who's the chairman of the Midwest U.S.-China Association. He's going to be talking in his remarks about a variety of topics. But first we wanted to discuss the annual Monmouth poll that we've done on Midwest Matters. This year we conducted another poll. I believe this is our fourth. And we did the poll on a variety of topics, including several that Governor Holden worked with us on. Some very interesting current issues that we want to talk about a little bit before we get to Governor Holden. And to do that, Nathan Kalmo, professor of political science here, is going to take you through some of our key findings. Some very interesting findings, I think, in this poll that have a lot of ramifications for current policy, and I think, again, that Governor Holden will be talking about. Nathan's a great addition to the Monmouth campus community and the city of Monmouth. He brings a background in political science, and especially in communications and public opinion. So he was a great ally, a great person to work with on this poll, and he brought a lot of insight, I think, and you'll see in his discussion that he has a lot of great knowledge about this, and I think is, again, a great addition to our political science staff in the college and our community. So with that, we'll have Nathan come up and again talk about a little bit about the poll.
Thank you all for coming, and welcome to Governor Holden as well. To begin, we'd like to share a few snapshots from our 2015 Midwest Matters poll. This year, we fielded a survey on Midwest attitudes in a globalizing world. We had several goals in mind. First, we wanted to see how Midwest attitudes have changed since our previous surveys in 2011 and 2012. We also wanted to assess Midwest attitudes towards other nations, policy attitudes on U.S.-China relations, immigration attitudes, as well as seeing what the durability of these attitudes were over time. In other words, how much can politicians and other people who have a stake in policy outcomes shift views in the public in the Midwest. In February, we conducted 500 phone interviews with adults in 8 Midwestern states. You see them here. We ran the study through We Ask America, and we're contacting landlines with random digit time. We began with broad attitudes about how things are going in the Midwest. We asked respondents if they saw the Midwest on the wrong track or heading in the right direction. As you can see here, since our 2011 study, Midwest attitudes have improved. There are fewer people who are saying that Midwest is on the wrong track. You also see, for comparison, the averages from national polls of respondents who are giving their views on where the nation is headed, whether it's on the wrong track or the right direction. Midwesterners see the Midwest as doing better than Americans see the nation as a whole. This gives you a snapshot of where attitudes are across the 8 different states that we looked at. Iowans see their state in the least negative light. Indianans are most pessimistic about the direction of their state, and you see we're not too far behind here in Illinois. You also see that there's partisan differences in these attitudes about wrong track versus right direction. You see the average on the left there. I've also split this out in terms of states that have Republican governors versus Democratic governors. The pattern that you see here is that, in general, Democrats are more optimistic about the direction of the Midwest than Republicans. That could be because of a Democratic president that tends to bias things towards the in-party thinking things are going great and the out-party thinking that things are not going so great. But you see there's also a distinction among Democrats as well, that those who are living in states with Democratic governors are particularly positive. And the way we have this scaled here are less negative than even Democrats who are living under Republican governors. So that's an interesting observation as well. If we saw a Republican president and Republican governors, we would expect to see a shift the other way. It's not that Republicans are inherently more pessimistic here. We also want to look at attitudes, favorability towards other nations among Midwesterners. The first thing that you see here, we asked about several different countries. You see that countries that are typically viewed as enemies, or at least certainly not friends of the United States, are receiving low ratings, while our traditional allies are receiving pretty high ratings. One interesting exception to that is Mexico is rated equally by Midwesterners in terms of favorability to Cuba. Cuba is a country we've had unfriendly relations with for some time, and Mexico is a pretty strong ally in North America. So the equation of those two favorability scores is an interesting dynamic here. But in general, you see a pretty big cut point between the quite favorable nations and those that are less favorable in the eyes of Midwesterners. We can also look at this favorability ratings by Democrats and Republicans. A couple of things stand out here. You still see the same general patterns of favorability and unfavorability. In general, Democrats and Republicans are actually pretty much in agreement on several of these nations, on the enemies or the perceived enemies of the U.S., including Russia and China to some extent, as well as Canada, Germany, and Japan. There's a fair amount of partisan agreement on favorability towards those countries. But you see a pretty big distinction between Republicans and Democrats on Mexico and Cuba in particular. In each case, Republicans are rating these other countries as less favorable, at least slightly, than Democrats. You see that difference most on Cuba and Mexico. In terms of immigration attitudes, compared to our 2011 study, our study in 2015 shows that support for enforcement of the current laws and the system of deportation has actually declined about 10% in the last 4 years, and there's also been a concomitant increase in support for integration and pathway to citizenship. However, you still see that a majority still supports the harsher deportation direction. We also wanted to see how durable immigration attitudes are, and this will take me just a second to explain. It's a little bit more involved. We asked about former Governor Jeb Bush's immigration proposal. He suggested finding at least some element of legal status, legal residency for people who are undocumented. And so we asked half of the sample how they felt about this policy, and the other half of the sample, randomly selected, was given Jeb Bush's name and the former Republican governor label with that. What we expected to see was that this partisan cue with Jeb Bush would shift attitudes, and in fact, that is what we see. First, you see on the left, on the furthest away from me, support among Democrats is much higher for this plan for legal residency than among Republicans, who are much lower. Closest to me, but you see the solid line when we actually add Jeb Bush's name to the question. You see Democrats actually become less favorable towards this policy because they now learn that a Republican supports it, so they can't support that. And you see Republicans, on the other hand, particularly strong Republicans, greatly increase their support when they learn that Republican Jeb Bush is supportive of this plan, or at least has proposed it in the past. This is particularly striking because if you look over on the left, that's above 50% support among strong Republicans. So it suggests that immigration views are actually more malleable, that people are responding more to the candidate and particularly to the party than they are to the policy itself. And so that might be good news for Jeb Bush as he tries to get the 2016 nomination. In terms of attitudes on China, first we asked whether China was more of an economic opportunity or more of an economic threat for the United States. On average, we saw more respondents from the Midwest who said that it was a threat rather than an opportunity, and that difference was particularly large for Republicans, being more likely to see threat rather than opportunity. We also wanted to assess the malleability or the fungibility of attitudes towards trade relations between the U.S. and China. First, we asked whether respondents wanted to increase trade with China, keep it about the same, or decrease trade. Only 15% initially said that they supported increased trade with China, and 44% said they wanted to decrease trade. But then we wanted to see how durable that was. So with those who said that they wanted to increase trade relations with China, we tried to knock that down and see how durable is that support for increasing trade. We asked if the U.S. lost jobs, would we still support an increase in trade? 77% of these supporters said no. Cut U.S. wages, 81% said no. Helped China steal business secrets, 93% said no. Worsened treatment of Chinese workers, again, 93% said no. So among those who say they support increased trade relations, that is actually a fairly precarious support. Among those who said they wanted to keep trade the same or decrease it, we went the opposite direction. We wanted to see if we could increase their support for trade. So we asked if it lowered U.S. prices. In this case, only about a third said yes. If it added U.S. jobs, 75% said yes. If it raised U.S. wages, 69% said that they would support an increase in trade. If it lessened the chance of military conflict, 63% said that they would support an increase in trade. So once again, we see quite a bit of fungibility in those attitudes. So in conclusion, we see improving attitudes about the Midwest's direction. We see clear differentiations in favor of nations in the world. We see flexible attitudes on immigration and China, and quite strong partisan polarization on many, but not all, issues. Thank you.
It's my pleasure to introduce our special guest tonight, former Governor of Missouri, Bob Holden. He served as the 53rd Governor of Missouri between 2001 and 2005. He's chairman of the Midwest U.S.-China Association and was the founder of the Holden Public Policy Forum, and he also teaches at Webster University. While governor, Holden opened the first Missouri governmental office in China and is founder of the Holden Public Policy Institute Forum, Holden Public Policy Forum. He helped create Missouri's first Confucius Institute at Webster University. And in 2011 is when he became chairman of the Midwest U.S.-China Association. The Midwest U.S.-China Association is a bipartisan organization representing the 12 Midwestern states that encourages commerce, educational partnerships, and stronger cultural ties between the Midwestern U.S. and China. And he succeeded, for local interest, former Senator Adlai Stevenson from Illinois in that position. During Governor Holden's governmental career, he served in the Missouri House of Representatives for 6 years, was state treasurer for 2 terms before he was elected governor. I would also say he's a graduate from Missouri State University with a Bachelor of Science degree in political science, and he attended Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government for government executives. Another interesting thing about him being here on campus is he started his school in a one-room schoolhouse. Only in America could you go from a one-room schoolhouse and be governor and teach at a prestigious university. I'll also say, for the benefit of my students here, we talked about whether my students will relate to this, whether Missouri is pronounced Missouri or Missouri. So he may have some insight on that as well. Governor Holden, welcome to campus.
Thank you very, very much, Robin. Just for the record, I say Missouri. I come from the southern part of the state, but listening to KMOX radio and Cardinal baseball all the time, you got used to hearing Missouri as it's pronounced. So, I didn't try to play both sides of that coin when I was in office, which probably is the reason why I lost a time or two in my life. I don't know, but I never took that much to heart to try to play this side here or that side there and all this. President White, thank you very, very much for inviting me to your campus. I got to meet the president when he had just been here just a short amount of time, and we talked history. And I got my degree in political science, but I had enough hours got to have a major in history. And both of those go hand in hand, and so I'm delighted to be back on your campus with all of you. How many professors do we have in the audience tonight? Any? Very good. But just so you know, as Robin was saying in some of his comments, education is a very personal and very important issue for me. Without those teachers along the way, I would never have the opportunity to do all the things in life that I've done. And one of those individuals was a professor of mine in college. He taught international relations and international law. Now that's about as far from Birch Street, Missouri as you can get as far as issues go. But he so impressed me with his intellect, his thought process, that our second son is named after that college professor. So to all of the professors in the room, thank you very, very much for what you do. Robin and I, Robin is one of those individuals, like Dick Longworth in Chicago, that when I want to listen and talk and hear what their analysis is of our region, he's my go-to person. He probably knows more about the Midwest culture than just about anybody except maybe Dick Longworth. Both of them are on par with each other. And I think it's very, very important that all of us have a much better understanding on where we're from, what the values are, as we try to navigate these waters going into the next 50 years of our lives. Nathan, great job on putting together the material for the poll. I thought it was an extremely good poll. It was even better, honestly, after I got to visit with Robin and Nathan a little bit, and to look at where that poll was in 2011 in terms of attitudes and values, and where they're saying today, and let's watch that as we continue to move forward as a region and see what changes may occur in the future. 2 or 3 things I'll mention on the poll that I thought really struck out to me. One of the key findings was the direction of the region. And the people still, by and large, are very concerned about us, what track we're on, if we're headed the right direction, but at least the numbers are getting better. And that's important because that helps tell us a little bit about what the mindset and what the cultural attitudes are of our region itself. The Brookings Institute, the study they did a few months ago, talked about the dynamism that is slowing down all across the United States. Businesses churning and new firm formation has been in a persistent decline during the last few decades, and the pace of net new job creation has been subdued. Dynamism has declined in all 50 states, and in all but a handful of the more than 360 U.S. metropolitan areas during the last 3 decades. So what we talk about here in the Midwest, we're also seeing those same type of concerns and frustration in other parts of the country. In a recent article, Richard Longworth of the Chicago Global Council on Global Affairs wrote about the Midwest U.S. economy. The title of his article was Midwestern Wages, Flat as a Midwestern Landscape. Wages have actually shrunk since 2001 in only 2 of the U.S. states, and they are both in the Midwest, Michigan and Indiana. In this century, workers in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota gained 0.2% per year. In Ohio, it's 0.1% per year. And in Missouri, absolutely nothing at 0.0% per year. Across the country, the percentage of people of employable age who are actually working is at its lowest level since 1978. For men, it's lower than it's ever been in our country. Many Midwesterners may think that it is improving, but I wonder if it is just a case that we've been marred in this situation long enough that we're accepting too much and not really thinking about, in fact, what is occurring. Another point that I thought was important in the poll was Midwestern's attitudes concerning immigration. The poll indicates that the Midwestern positions on the issues have softened somewhat, but we still favor a tougher approach to immigration reform. And we are not supportive, hardly at all, of a soft approach to immigration reform, where we want to have tough penalties put in place. We want to make sure they stay there. In many ways, this sounds like maybe it's human nature speaking to us. Because quite candidly, whether we like to agree politically or not, Jeb Bush is pretty close to correct. There is no way we can identify all 11 million illegal immigrants within our culture, or undocumented immigrants, whichever phrase you want to use, and send them back. First of all, it would be impossible to find them all. Secondly, it would cost too much money to do it all. And third, it would destroy a good portion of the economy in the country, particularly in the Midwest, in the agricultural field. Because so many of these people work in that area. So even though our politics don't allow us to really sit down and be thoughtful about the issue, it's time we, the American people, think a great deal more about it. The poll also indicated some values about Mexico and Cuba, believing that they are the ones that have cost our jobs. And with Cuba, we still remember the Bay of Pigs, Cuban Missile Crisis, and the fact that it is a communist state. And we've held to those values. It's going to be very interesting to see as Washington, D.C. and our capitals throughout the country now are starting to figure out ways and to try to open up discussion and dialogues with the country of Cuba in the years ahead to see just exactly where our attitudes are with those countries in the next decade or so. The last point I want to make about the poll, the findings of the poll, concerns China. As Holden said about my background, I just want all of you to know that I do not believe that I am an expert on China. I also came to the realization that China is the second largest economy in the world and a growing economy. And if we want to create jobs in Missouri and the other states in the Midwest and this country, we've got to figure out a way to build those partnerships, if at all possible. So I was very interested to see what the polls had to say about China and those opportunities. I wonder, as Nathan outlined some of the information on China, if we had a growing economy, if people were more confident about us as a region, as a state, as a city, as an economy, would we still have the same views about China that we do in the Midwest? I looked also at the polling information about Germany and Japan. And I wonder if those polls had been taken in 46 and 47, what type of attitudes we would have had about those cultures and those countries at that point in time compared to what we think about today. If you look at the polls concerning Japan in the 70s, I don't think you would see near as favorable view of Japan at that point in time as they were taking all of our automotive jobs out of the Midwest, moving them south, or moving them over to Japan itself. So I mean, I think a lot of these polls, you have to look at them at the time they're taken and what factors are playing out in the minds of the people as they make their judgment. But our policymakers have to make their decision on what direction the country is going, what direction we're going as a state or as cities, by the information they have at the current time. I thought Bill Clinton probably had one of the best quotes about our circumstances that I've seen. He once said, "Profound and powerful forces are shaping and remaking our world. And the urgent question of our time is whether we can make change our friend and not our enemy. Because to resist it is to settle not only for the status quo, but in the world in which other countries and citizens are improving their skills, products, and services, the failure to change will only ensure continued decline. We all must understand and acknowledge that of the historical times that we are in. For 200 years, our economy was protected by two large oceans, one on the east coast and one on the west, by a friendly country to the north and a weak country to the south. We could grow, develop our economy and our culture with little outside interference. That has all changed, in the last 50 years. Technology and globalization since the end of World War II has changed our world forever. Too many of our citizens, governmental leaders, and businesses after World War II saw this as a great opportunity, and with little outside interference, we could build our country for the next 30 years or so. Now, since the 1980s, all of that has changed. The competition is no longer the business next door or in the partnering state, but it's around the world. Now we are in a new world with new businesses and countries competing against us for their share of the economic pie, working to write new rules and setting different priorities, building their own alliances that they control and not us. I tell my classes that I really very simply see two economics views of the world. You're either fighting over a shrinking portion of the economic pie, or you're trying to figure out how to enlarge that pie. And for the last 30, 40 years, we've been fighting over a shrinking portion of that pie. And as a former governor, I will tell you, I did it too. Because governors do not get reelected if the states next to them are stealing their jobs. Governors get reelected if they steal those jobs from the states around them, or the communities around them. And so for the last 30 or 40 years, we've fundamentally been moving jobs around the Midwest, but we've not been adding new jobs, as Dick Longworth said, to our economy. And that has to change. We're in a world where there's new rules are being applied for how we do things. The city-states, and the city, the states, the national boundaries no longer are that important to major corporations from around the world. These corporations will go where they find talent, where they have a good workforce, where they feel like they're wanted and treated better than they should, but they will go into those places. These companies and businesses are global, and their allegiance is to their leadership and to the stockholders, not to your city, not to your state, not even to your region, because their value is predicated on what value they get out of the products they produce and make around the world. A few years ago, I was in China at a major conference, and a CEO of one of the biggest Fortune 500 companies in the United States, located in the Midwest, stood up and gave a talk that lasted about 20, 25 minutes. He talked about the fact that they had more employees in China than they do the United States. He talked about how great it was that they were an international organization. Never once in that speech did he ever mention the fact that St. Louis was the headquarters of that company. It was all about what they were doing around the world and how great a neighbor they were to everyone. This is a world of today. This is a world our local businesses, institutions, and organizations must compete in. I believe we can compete. And I believe our mid-size and our large businesses can be successful in this new world order. But we also must be willing to change and adapt. What do we have working in our favor? We are recognized historically as the breadbasket of the world. We have all the major agricultural corporations and companies in the world are headquartered somewhere within the Midwest. The major agricultural universities, research foundations like University of Illinois at Champaign, the Danforth Plant Science Center, on and on and on, all are located in the Midwest United States. Our 12-state region, as a region, is the 5th most powerful economy in the world. Now, if you take each of us as individual states or individual cities within states, only Chicago and sometimes Illinois will show up on the international radar screen. But if you take the 12 Midwestern states and put them together as a unit, we have the 5th most powerful economy in the world right in our midst. We also have, I am told, one resource the world will be demanding more than any other 25 years from now. And it is not oil. It's fresh water. Our region has 22% of the world's fresh water. 22% of the entire world's fresh water is located within our region. The Great Lakes, Mississippi, Missouri, the Ohio valleys, all are within the grasp of our region. Our roads, our rails, our waterways, our air transportation allow us to move people and product faster to the largest economies economically in the world, better than anybody else. We have a lot going for us. And the most important attribute, the one I believe gives us the greatest opportunity to be successful going forward, is institutions of higher education throughout the Midwest. 1,300 academic educational institutions are located in the Midwest United States. We have excellent facilities and instructors to educate our future leaders in the fields of law, business, engineering, chemistry, medicine, economics, scientific research. We lead the world. In all of these categories, the Midwest United States is home to 25 to 33% of the world's best in every one of those categories. But two, these institutions must change. They must learn where we've been successful, but how we must adapt. We must look at how we can use technology to realign our processes and our educational system so that we can truly continue to be the educator for the next generation of leaders from all over the world. But if we will embrace change, it could add a whole new importance to the academic institutions we have in the Midwest. Our higher educational institutions can not only educate the best lawyers, engineers, and scientists, but it can also help shape the foundation of those values that will be formed through our educational system. 4 or 5 years ago, as I was finishing one of my classes at Webster, I always give the students the opportunity, before they walk out the door, after I've turned in their grades, so they don't have to worry about anything like that, I always ask them what they have any comments they want to make. I will never forget, this young lady stood up. She said, "Governor, I will not go back to China the same person that came to America. If we truly want to influence the world, if we truly wanted to establish and create a values that we hold dear, then the best thing we can do is open our institutions so that we can let more of these bright young people into our midst, learn from us and our professors, and hopefully some of them will stay here, and some of them will go back home, wherever that may be. But they will not go back to their home country, their home city, the same person that came to America. What better foreign policy could we have as a nation than being in a position to truly influence the next generation of leaders all around the world? To me, what she said it all. That is why it is so very, very important what you do here and what our other 1,299 institutions are doing throughout the Midwest. That is why it is so important for us to, I think, look at how we can take every one of these academic institutions and truly globalize them to be on the forefront of sending our message and our educational values around the world. Things like student exchanges, building relationships with foreign academic institutions. All of these things will help us in the long run to not only be economically successful here as institutions, but to be successful around the world on our values and what we hold so dear. A couple of years ago, to show you just how important I think something like this is, I had the opportunity to go to Iowa to meet what was supposed to be the next president of China. He did become, by the way, president of China. But all the way as I was driving up to Des Moines, that area, I was wondering, why is the next president of China coming to Iowa? Now, I have a brother that graduated from great law schools. I think Iowa's a great place. But he was making 4 stops: New York City, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, California, and a place called Muscatine, Iowa. Now, I have to tell you, and this is a true story, I got out the atlas and I couldn't find Muscatine, Iowa. I had to get a magnifying glass and then I did find it. But the story that goes is 27 years earlier, as a young official studying agricultural issues, about 21 or 22, 23 years old, he was sent to the United States to study our ag programs and what we were doing. And he was sent to a place called Muscatine, Iowa, and a family there whose 2 sons had left for college. They had a spare bedroom. They offered that he could stay in their home for the days that he was in Iowa studying agricultural issues. So his first trip back to the United States as the next president of China, he wanted to go back and see his friends in Muscatine, Iowa. Take the time to look and see how many soybean deals and other agreements have been made between Iowa and China since that time. That's the reason. That's the reason. What you do here at this institution, what we do at all the other institutions throughout the Midwest, is so critical to our state's future. It's young people like you. They're not afraid to sit down and get to know somebody from a foreign country or somebody from a different culture, or to learn a little bit about something you've never been involved with before. That is the environment by which relationships are built. Relationships relationships do matter. Let's work on building relationships for the Midwest to more people around the world. That's how we will maintain our influence around the world and help our young people to be successful, more successful than we've ever been before. We all know in our culture we focus on the 3 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic. Emmett, I'm sure you do that just as well as we do in Missouri. In China, they have a different 3 R's as part of their Confucius philosophy. It's relationships, respect, and responsibility. Why don't we take the time to kind of combine both of those and truly talk about trying to build a world order that is based on the science, on the reading, the writing, the arithmetic, but also the relationships, the respect, the responsibilities, and pull those things together. In fact, we're working on a project now in Missouri. In 1990s, a president of a university there, Northwest Missouri State University, and I'm sure that nobody here knows where that is. It's in Maryville, Missouri. It was a small university up in the northwest part of the state of Missouri. But the Dean Hubbard, the president of that university, had graduated from Stanford. And he wanted to try to figure out how he could make his university, that was in the middle of nowhere, stand out and be viable in the years ahead. So he was, as far as I know, was the first president of the university that set up a high school STEM program on their university campus. Juniors and seniors from high schools around the state of Missouri. And they worked it out so they could always go back and get their diploma from their school, because none of the high schools wanted to give up that grade point when they were looking at the averages and how well each of the schools done. But they also did one other thing that I found is truly unique and have not seen it anywhere else. They also recruited students from Korea and China to be part of the program. And so not only were they educating the best and the brightest Missouri students in math and science and technology, they were tapping in to young people from China and Korea. And they were tapping them in from the academic standpoint of the math and the sciences, but they also were laying the foundations so that those young people could build relationships at that age. Because I tell my students at Boys State and Girls State, I speak those audiences, none of us know who's going to be a mayor of a city, or the CEO of a corporation, or a legislator, state official, or even the President of the United States, or President of China. But somebody is. And the more of these interactions you can have, the better off and the better chance we have of being part of that solution and benefiting by this. 2 years ago, in 2013, for the first time in the history of the American Legion Boys State and Girls State program anywhere in the country, we brought 36 students from China to participate in the most iconic American institution in the United States. I will tell you, not all the Legionnaires were all that happy about the idea of bringing those students from China to study with our good old American Missouri boys and girls. But before the week was out, they were fully on board and have endorsed the effort to do it again. This last December, January, we sent some students from Boys State and Girls State in Missouri to China. And they spent 10 days in China. They spent an hour and a half. The ambassador of the United States to China, Ambassador Baucus. They spent half a day with Denton's law firm, now the largest law firm in the world. They spent time with Jennifer Lee, who heads up the consortium of all of American agricultural interests in China. They visited 4 of the top 5 Chinese universities. Those young people, and none of them had been outside the United States before that trip. Those young people got an opportunity to see what the world is all about, that they're going to be inheriting, and we're going to be asking them to lead in the years ahead. And so when I talk about the Midwest and the great opportunities, they're there. But I also talk about the importance and the value of our universities and our colleges taking the lead in building that path for all of us to follow. Because our universities are the ones that truly can carry our culture and our heritage and knows our history to other people around the world, so we can build those partnerships as young people. So when they become CEOs and mayors and presidents tomorrow, they will know each other, and we hopefully will live in a more peaceful world. Thank you very much.